So there's actually more people here than I was quoted. So if you don't want one, just pass them around. I don't know if you want to read them on the order. I think it's 20. So I'm going to get started if that's okay with everyone. My name is Will Burton. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, University of Manitoba. I'm in the last year of the After Degree program in the middle year stream. And my presentation this morning is entitled Those Who Can Create Change Teach. And I'm going to be talking this morning a little bit about social justice in the classroom and outside of the classroom. I'm going to draw in some connections to the curriculum and external sites of learning. There's basically 2 points to my thesis that I want to talk about today. I argue that teaching is a political act, and people within the classroom, i.e. the teachers and the students, are political players within that environment. Teachers can either choose to stick with the status quo and teach directly to the curriculum, or they can teach for social justice and work towards reducing social inequities, not just inside the classroom, but in their communities as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can do this and give some examples. The second point to my thesis is that teachers themselves need to be involved in external sites of learning to be effective social justice teachers inside the classroom. So I'm going to start off first of all with a definition, just so we know where we're heading with this. This is a quote from Montaigne in 2002. She argues that teacher activists are critical educators who define social justice as a call to social action. They're engaged in a political battle to reclaim the public schools, where they engage in dialogue and social action around the issues of what kind of society we are forming. And that's the definition that I've used to guide my presentation this morning. So let's start with the curriculum. In Manitoba, British Columbia, Ontario, and Alberta, social studies curriculum draws in those ideas of citizenship, of social justice. So, for example, Manitoba, citizenship is the ability to approach public issues critically, rationally, and democratically. Democratically is a really key point to what I'm arguing this morning. They are to be involved in public affairs, respect for human rights, democratic ideals and principles, and they need to demonstrate a commitment to freedom, equality, and social justice, and that they are part of a global community. British Columbia, very similar. Students need to practice active citizenship, and they need to develop the skills, attitudes, and processes necessary to be responsible, active citizens. They need to be thoughtful, active in their communities, and again, as part of a global society. Ontario and Alberta are very similar. Alberta in particular, the curriculum advocates students getting involved in their communities through social justice work as early as grade 2 and 3. So, social justice in the classroom, we've got the curriculum documents there. There's been an increased scholarship on social justice in the last 5 to 10 years. And this is important because it's coming at a time where we have this kind of a neoliberal agenda where it's butting up against these ideas. There's this willingness by certain corners to draw education into the economic sphere and get the best bang for your buck. So what we need in the classroom right now, I'm arguing, is individuals who are knowledgeable and passionate about making a difference, and they need to be working against this agenda. Giroux and McLaren articulate a particular kind of teacher. They call them the transformative intellectual. And this teacher treats students as critical agents. And these critical agents play a key role in making the classroom more democratic. They are active community participants whose function is to establish public spaces where students can debate, appropriate, and learn the knowledge and skills necessary to live in a critical democracy. I think that's really important. So, before we go any further, I want to give 3 examples of student activism from 3 different cities. The first one was a grade 5 and 6 class in Red Deer, Alberta, where the teacher initiated a social justice project. He had the students conduct some research into mosquito spraying in Red Deer. We're from Winnipeg, we deal with mosquitoes all the time, and they do a lot mechanical spraying where trucks go around the city, and there's been some links to the neural system, negative effects on pregnant females. So the students did some research, and they weren't really happy in Red Deer what they found. So they took their results and they formulated an idea of how they could change the policy. So they decided that they wanted to introduce a mosquito predator into the water in Red Deer. And they took their idea to City Hall, and it was actually approved by City Hall. They were really impressed with the findings of these grade 5-6 students. So in Red Deer, they changed towards a more natural predator against mosquitoes. Langley, BC, this happened just last year. A student decided that she wanted to create a play to raise awareness about homelessness. So she created this play with the help of her drama teacher. And it was about a youth that was homeless sitting outside of a hotel. And it just detailed the interactions that that youth had with passers-by. And originally it was just for her school, but the school division was so impressed with it that they decided to take it on the road, so to speak. And they raised money for it, and the money went to a local charity. Desiree, her name was, and she credited her drama teacher for giving her support, and then the school for backing her and taking this out. Third example from my hometown, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Gordon Bell High School. This is, at present, Gordon Bell's school field. It's an inner-city school, so there's limited resources for a real field. So these students don't actually get to have gym class in a school field, until recently anyway. But in 2008, this piece of land, and you'll be able to see just behind here is where the asphalt ground was. This piece of land became available. It used to be a car dealership, but it became available. And it was originally pegged as a site for the new Canada Post location. However, inspired by an alumni writing an editorial in the Winnipeg Free Press, which was then picked up by the student council at Gordon Bell, they began to generate an awareness campaign around the community, which was then backed by the teachers union, which was then backed by the teachers in the school. And they managed to get this piece of land designated as the future site for a new school field. Great. Then they had to initiate a second round to raise funds to actually get the project done. Obviously, this needs a lot of work. It's a contaminated site, so they actually raised awareness twice, and then raised the funds, and the school field, which should look something like this, is set to open later this year. So it's a phenomenal site. This is Portage Avenue right here, so it's going to look fantastic. And this is something that these students had, done from nothing. It was originally going to be a hideous Canada Post building, but now students for future generations have a real school field where they can actually play football and walk in trees and things like that. It's fantastic. What normal kids should do rather than walking on asphalt. So, obviously there is some arguments against it. I mentioned a little bit earlier about kind of a right-wing agenda, bringing the education into the economic sphere. But there are other arguments. So, the first one is indoctrination. These teachers are out there, they're getting these kids to do these things that they care about, that the kids probably don't really care about. And they're using these students, Students get a sympathetic vote like they did in Red Deer, possibly. So that's one argument. And the students in the classroom, if they want to pass the class, they should probably do what the teacher says. So, they're not really formulating their own opinions. And that is a completely valid argument, but what is important is to make sure the classroom is democratic, to give students the option to come to their own conclusions. The teacher involved in the mosquito spraying, said, this could be an issue, I'd like you to research it and formulate your own opinion. And in the study, it actually said that some students didn't agree with the course of action that by going to City Hall. So they were allowed to stand aside where most of the students went forward to City Hall. So not pressuring students to keep that democratic ideal in the classroom is absolutely essential. Another argument is that teaching for social justice in the classroom takes away from education essentials. I'm thinking reading, writing, and arithmetic. if you're focusing on these action projects, you're not really doing the real schoolwork there. You're not really gaining real knowledge. However, for many of these action projects, you're integrating all these different subjects. So, for example, you're integrating social studies, English, math, science. I mean, that's what learning is all about, right? Making those connections to other subject areas, other areas of curriculum. The final argument, a prevalent argument, is that it's anti-capitalist, that social action projects are working against the capitalist economy. They're working against certain groups. So, for example, and it's true, right? There's a lot of people that identify with a socialist agenda that are teachers. However, I don't really think the examples that I've given you can really argue against their worth, what the students have learned from that experience. I mean, you may be able to say, well, the mosquito fogging, that's anti-capitalist because that chemical company has now lost that contract. But in reality, these people have done the research. The students have identified that it's having a negative effect. So, all valid arguments, but not ones that I particularly prescribe to. So, how do we get this in the classroom? The Clark model, 2008. She identified 6 stages to getting a social action project in the classroom. The first stage is pre-planning. So this is even before you've talked to the students. This is where a teacher formulates an idea, thinks it over, and then immediately goes to administration, runs it by administration. If you don't have administration on board, it can make your life very difficult. So getting administration on board is absolutely key. Finding something suitable that you think that the students can achieve. It should be related, to something relevant in the students' lives as well. So that's where a community comes involved. Getting something that's relevant. Getting administration support also helps for finding as well. But the teacher should be confident that the topic is doable for the students. So then the next stage, if you've cleared all that, introduce the idea to the students. And make sure there's links to the curriculum, because as soon as you introduce it to the students are going to go home, talk to it with their parents. So make sure you've identified how this fits in with the curriculum. So if you do have a parent that comes to you, you can say, well, right here in the curriculum. And I've identified earlier how relevant these social action projects can be to the curriculum. You want to outline expectations so the students know where it's going. Although you want to give the students the freedom to research and investigate themselves, parameters are essential to keep things on track and to set deadlines. Then, let the students investigate. You need to provide the resources, so you need to identify them and introduce them to students so students know how to use the resources and then how to use them effectively. We just heard from Devin about media literacy for students. So, making sure they know how to use the tools to be effective in the classroom. They need to use the resources to come to their own view. I talked about a democratic classroom. Don't pressure the students to come to a certain conclusion. They need to come to it themselves. Once they've done the research, they need to figure out how to take what they've learned and then come to an achievable solution. It's great to do the research, but unless they are actually figuring out how to create change, it's pointless, right? You're doing all this work and then you're just leaving it. It doesn't work like that. So the students need to figure out whether they're going to take direct action or indirect action. Direct action is directly going to the source of the problem, identifying it, and fixing that problem for yourself. So, for example, if you don't think that there's enough awareness about homelessness, as in the example from Langley, that's direct action. Indirect action would be like the mosquito spraying, where they went to council who had the power to make the change. I would say the Gordon Bell example is a bit of both, because they were directly involved in getting that piece of land, but it meant that they were taking it away from another group. So it's kind of a blend in there. So they need to plan how they're going to carry out this action project and consider the challenges that they're going to face and then how to deal with those challenges. And then the final stage, implementation. This is absolutely essential, getting students to carry through with their actions. It's also important to end with a debrief and a reflection of the project. How do we feel about how things went? What did we learn? What did we learn about our community? What did we learn about the democratic process? So the second point that I identified that I want to touch on today is teachers' involvement in alternative sites of learning. And I think this is kind of something that is not addressed to the extent of social justice in the classroom. My argument is when we can see how effective students becoming engaged in social justice in the classroom is, why are teachers themselves not becoming as well involved outside of the classroom? So some examples of how a teacher could do this would be to, campaign for greater access to food banks. There's a major link there with inner city schools. Protesting lack of clean water availability in northern reserves. Greater financial allocations for childcare. So you're making that links with your community. That may be something that your parents are in need of as well. And development of green space projects, just like we saw in the Gordon Bell example. So the links already exist between the school and the community, but I think that they need to be encouraged for a number of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of things that teachers can gain by being involved in external sites, and those skills can transfer directly into the classroom. And I've listed a few here. So the skills you're developing could be, dissemination of information, implementation of logistical and organizational procedures. It broadens your problem-solving strategies. It unites individuals together. We're talking about collaboration a lot at this conference, and I think that's important to work with others to achieve a solution. It strengthens your questioning strategy. So, why is this a problem? How can I solve it? Why is this not being fixed? And also, it's making you more aware of inequities outside of the classroom, so you are more aware of them inside of the classroom. I'm thinking more LGBTQ issues or gender or racism, things like that. So becoming aware of them outside of the classroom, I think, translates into the classroom. And overall, becoming involved in these projects outside the classroom, you're not doing it without hope, right? And I think that's maybe the biggest link, because you have to have faith in making a difference outside, working towards achieving a goal. And if you don't have faith as teachers in your students' ability to become better people, to learn, then how are the students expected to become better? It's a major link in a belief in a better tomorrow and faith that your work is going to make a difference. So I'm just going to conclude by highlighting We Day. Who here has been to We Day or heard of We Day? All right, wow, lots of people, great. So We Day, we had it in Winnipeg for the second year in October. 18,000 students attended at the MTS Center. You don't even get that many for Jets game. So all those students were admitted to the MTS Center on the condition that they would carry out one social justice act within the year. That place was oversold multiple times. There were kids that were really unhappy that they couldn't go, but that shows you the kind of desire that the students have to become involved in social justice work. There's so much to be gained. I mean, we're in this incredible position where we can affect students. We can show them things. We can expose them to ideas, and there's so much to be gained when teachers are social justice activists, when they're working against the status quo. But there's even more that's lost when we stick with the status quo, when we agree with, just teaching to the curriculum, teaching the essentials, not exposing students to new ideas. So I'm arguing that teachers have a decision to make. Are they going to do just what's required? Are they going to go beyond? Are they going to get involved in social justice work inside the classroom? Are they going to take that little bit of spare time they have on the weekends or after school to get involved in social justice work themselves? Not working against the system is making the decision that as things are fine, that there's no inequities, or if they are, we don't really care about them. So I'm going to leave you with a quote from Paulo Freire. As educators, we are politicians. We engage in politics when we educate, and if we dream of democracy, let us fight night and day. The question remains, what kind of society do you want to live? Thank you. Thank the following people, like a credits reel at the end of the movie. Thanks for joining. Thank you to UNBC. It's been awesome. Questions? Sure.
So, I mean, everybody has to know their evaluation as okay. What do you do as a teacher if your project fails? Is there an action a lot of work into it, even as adults, I put a lot of work into something and there's no acknowledgement or just falls in my face and
That's a great point, and there's a number of points to that. So first of all, you want to pick a project that you think is achievable.
okay, yeah.
Second of all, you want to work through the challenges before you've carried out that action. But I don't necessarily think the failure is a bad thing always. I mean, I think we can all maybe speak to bad experiences that we've had in our practicum, and that we've all learned from that. And then, letting the students know that it's okay to fail, but that debrief at the end is essential. Like, what did we learn from this? What will we change in the future? Absolutely, it's not always going to work, but making sure you're setting up the students to have a good experience, and then recognizing even before you carried out that project that it may not work, but here's what we're going to try and do to avoid it from failing.
Then how student-led is it? I mean, it kind of like sounds a bit inquiry-based as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, I guess it's a blend of letting the students really take the project as their own versus your own kind of input into it though.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've already put through all these steps, it's very manipulation. I mean, I totally agree with it, like, don't get me wrong.
No,
It's an interesting.
It is, right, because you want to create this environment where the students are driving it, but you yourself need to recognize that there are challenges involved, and I think that's why the external sites where you're engaging in that and you can recognize when things aren't going to work, it's having those conversations with the students, like identifying, well, this happened and this didn't work, what do we do about this? You don't want to force your students in a certain direction, but you can guide them. I think we do that in the classroom all the time with inquiry. Setting those parameters that are safe, but allow the freedom for them to find themselves. Yes. No.
Sorry. Thank you.